So we're on to the next job, and that job is this huge pile of frames that we've got from melting down all the dead outs. But it's positive. We're re-waxing. We've got enough foundation, only just. So I'm going to be just showing you how I sort the frames out, clean them off a little bit, straighten up the wires and re-wax them for use this year. We use these cauliflower or vegetable crates we pick up at our supermarket, and these take our frames just fine. You can see we stack our Mini Plus in the frames like this. We get about 32, I think, in each one. That's the Mini Plus frames. They're ready to be re-waxed. So there's a lot there, but there's a lot at the back of this pile. This pile is obviously absolutely huge. And we ran out of these boxes for a while, but we found a load more. But in the meantime, when we ran out, we just bundled them up because we're melting down stuff so quickly. So that's what I tend to do. I tend to just bundle them up in the bundles of, I think, 36 that come out of the wax melter. And then they're let to dry. So what I'm doing now is I'm going through and sorting out the good frames. They're going to go back home with me today because what we're doing is we're not coming to the workshop where possible, so we don't interact with each other. We're just basically self-isolating at home so we can then get work done at home, be with the family and get these frames waxed up, because the spring inspection is going to start now and the next few weeks. I need frames to put in when I take out the partitions, and basically that's what we're doing. We're going to start re-waxing the frames. So when I get all these home, you see I've loaded up the truck with a fair few. Get all these home, I'm going to start to clean them off and let the sun do a bit of work, dry all the wax out, all the old frames out. They need a bit of sun on them. It helps dry them all out, and they're beautiful to work with when they're dry. But so these are all vertically wired frames, and the older ones were used to be horizontally wired. Vertical wired frames are actually a lot easier for us because they have 6 wires, whereas the old horizontal ones we used to have only got 4 wires, as you can see there. But with the 6 wires, it does hold the wax straighter for longer if you get any increases in temperature in the colony before they rebuild onto the frames. So I'll talk about that a little bit when I get back. But that's just to give you some idea what I'm doing. I'm just taking out the old frames and only taking the good ones. These old ones will be made into partitions for the hive. So it's not that they're going to be wasted. They're always another resource we're going to use. And I'll make these into partitions later on. They'll be made into these. This is our partitions. I think I've shown you these before. Straightforward with a bit of foam filler inside that you often have to paint these days, otherwise the bees chew them. But this is an old style foam we can't seem to get anymore. The bees don't eat these, but there you go. Anyway, that's what we're doing, starting on this. So welcome back to my veranda or conservatory, which works out as a fantastic workplace because I get loads of natural light. As you can see, the weather has done typical spring thing. It's gone cold, it's windy, it's definitely no working bees. So I'm back to, yes, doing these frames, which I talked about before. Now, these are the ones I've just done. Why should I reuse them? Well, because obviously it makes economic sense. The amount of time it takes us to re-wax them is huge in comparison to buying a new. But this year, as we've had so many losses over the winter, and we can't get any frames at the moment, and we can't get much wax, so we have time, while the weather's like this, to re-wax the frames, okay? So I'll explain what we do and why we do it. Guess who's here? Helping me do these frames, eh? Sleepyhead. Okay. So, the frames we've done, I'll kind of explain why we redo them. Obviously I said because of the economics, but also because we have the materials here in our hands to use them now. And when you hear the rain on the roof, you see why we've got time. All we have to do with this is scrape it clean, if it needs much scraping. There's this dilemma about how clean you should make your frames, okay? And I know there'll be people that go, oh, you should have soaked them in bleach, blah, 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 blah. I don't disagree with you, but the reality is the bees will do all of that, okay? They've been through a steamer at 100 degrees, we scrape off the worst. We know they come from colonies that were not dying of brood diseases. We know there was no chalk brood. All that kind of stuff adds up a lot when you're reusing. This weather is just awful when you're reusing frames, okay? So all we do is we go through, we re-pull the wires, we straighten them up, and we put a pin in using a drawing pin to just tighten this overall frame up. It's quicker to put a drawing pin in this frame than it is to undo the wires at the top and pull it through and then restaple it at the top. This is why it makes economic sense for us to do this. I'll come over to the workstation and I'll show you what I converted my dining room table to be for the moment, okay? So excuse the various cups of tea and biscuit packets. Here we have a really simple workstation. I've got, on my left, I've got the supply, that's my box where my frames go when they're done. Here, obviously, was the frames waiting to be done. I'm working from kind of on my right-hand side where I pick up the frame because I'm right-handed. It's just easy for me. I've got my pile of frames, sorry, I've got my pile of foundation on the left, my battery charger, I've got various scraper tools, but I don't really use them much, and I've got some drawing pins. Now, drawing pins are really cheap and they're the best and the quickest thing to use. So this is how I clean the frame and get it up and running from start to finish. Now, this is what they call getting into your 50s, okay? So I'm going to wear my glasses because it does help me see these frames when I dig them out, okay? I'll wear them like this so I can look down in the frame and look up as well. So we got our frame. Okay, first thing I do is I just clean the wires off by hand, like this. And what that does, it just gets off any lumps of wax or material. You can see you might want to scrape a bit out of here. Scrape a bit off here, you know, here and there. Anything that might stop that wax sitting into the frame of the foundation. Give it a knock, brush it off and brush all the bits away. And I have this board this board is over 20 years old. It's an antique, okay? I cut this when I well, 20 years old. It's probably 11 years old now when I started beekeeping. And I cut it to the size of Dayton frames. So I do, and then what I do is when I'm ready with my sheet of wax, which goes from here onto there, I then put this over, and then that frame sits on the wax, and as I melt the wires, it embeds each piece in, okay? So, all I do is I turn this upside down, and with my little hive tool here, where it's like a mini screwdriver, but I call it a hive tool, I'm lifting up the wire. If you want to zoom in, come in close, and you can see I'm just digging out this wire here, okay? And that wire will mean that it releases the tension across the whole of the frame. There's one just there, I think. Because typically the sun's gone in and we haven't got much. There you go, that one there. Okay, and I'll do this one here. You can see how loose this wire is here straight away. That's quite loose, that one. But by pulling it to the center, then I can gather the whole up. And hopefully, now that one isn't, so I've got to just go in the top side here. Dig that out, there it is. And that one now, that's tightened through. This one here. Okay, so now I can pull the whole thing to one central place. Okay, and there's my, come around this side, you'll see. I can do this with the pin. I can just put a pin in here. And that then straightens and tightens the whole wires up. Now they're not like piano wire tight like they would be when we buy them, because when we buy these in packs of 20 and they're absolutely perfect. But these have been used. Sometimes the bottom bar bows a bit under the pressure, so I don't want to tighten it too much, because if I tighten it too much, I can't get the wax back in the foundation of the frame. Okay, so this is now ready to take that foundation. This goes on top of the wax, okay? And as it goes on top of the wax, it's sitting over that piece of wood, but with the wax underneath it. So I've got my two electrodes here, which are, it's just a 12-volt battery charger and with two 6-inch nails on, okay? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to melt the wires in individually, and you'll see as I melt the wire in, it actually embeds the wire into the wax. So it's dead simple, but a lot of people make a lot of fuss about this, but it doesn't have to be perfect, okay? So I'll show you, I go from top to bottom. First one in. It's a little bit more time, well, in fact, it's a lot more time consuming. And what you can do is you can push the wires in a bit if they move a bit when you melt them. So you can hold that in as it dries. There again. So that one's moved right out, but I can do that with it and just move it to the side. Now what you can see, the smoke coming off, that is the coating of wax that's left on the wires when we melt all the wax off. So we do one more there. Another one there. That then, this actual sheet has a hole in it for some reason, but that's no big deal, that little piece there. But that's going to make no difference whatsoever. You can see it's completely melted in, absolutely no problem. And again, I leave the gap at the top. Now, a lot of people don't like that, but I do, because the bees will always build the top. First thing they do is start at the top. And if they build cells to the bottom, you might gain 2 lines of cells at the bottom. So they sometimes reduce it, I agree, they can chew through it, but when you've got a good strong colony, you might gain 2 lines of cells, and 2 lines of cells on 5 or 6 frames is a lot of extra bees and a lot of extra capacity in the colony. So that's what we do. We're reusing those frames. They're clean enough to a certain extent. I then put these back in these boxes. These boxes are brilliant for transporting in your truck. The frames are then kept vertical and they don't get damaged. And they are basically free. So that's all we do. It's a pretty straightforward thing. The problems we're having this year, as I said before, we can't buy any new frames, which I wouldn't be too worried about because we've got so many to use. But the other thing is foundation. We are not really allowed to go to the beekeeping shop to take our old wax to exchange to get new foundation. So we're going to have to just buy it and get it sent here, and it's going to cost us quite a bit. But that is one of the downsides of coronavirus. It affects everybody in different ways. We're all having to adapt. We're just having to be really careful. And obviously I've got less colonies this year, so I'll be making less nukes initially the first part of the year. But as the year goes on, I'll need a lot more wax and a lot more frames. So I have actually got I've got 250 brand new frames in store. And as soon as I get some more foundation, I can make those up very quickly. It actually takes, the process I showed you when we have the new frames takes probably 1/5 of the time it does using the old frames. But that's just the way it is. So I'm here just working away. I can be here to keep an eye on the house, to get all this done, and to do other jobs around when the weather isn't raining and when I've got all my nukes here. I'm going to feed more pollen sub this week, and it's the pollen sub I put on all those last 2-3 weeks that they're really munching through now. So it's absolutely fantastic. And as of the end of this coming week, the first week of April, those bees will be split. We'll be taking queens that we've got spare and making nukes as well. So it's absolutely great. And then by the time we get to then, I'll finish this 200 or 300 I've got stacked up here. There's some more outside that have just got wet, but they'll soon dry out. I've got a load more of the workshop to bring back here, and I'll be doing this for about 4 or 5 days. But another thing to mention is, don't forget, when you're doing this, it gets everywhere. Try and be as clean as you can. Put stuff down on the floor, because propolis gets trodden everywhere. And every time you finish, sweep up, because it just stops that migration throughout the house, I can tell you. But there you go. I don't get moaned at anymore because I am divorced, so it's absolutely great. Anyway, whatever you're doing, enjoy yourself, keep yourself going, keep yourself motivated, and I'll catch you again soon. Bye for now.